Hello and welcome everyone to our presentation and panel session today, which is on a very topical issue. Is a centralized QA function still needed with Agile and DevOps? Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alec McCutcheon and I'm going to be moderating today's session. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank our speakers and panelists. They bring with them a great deal of experience and knowledge. They include Folu Komalafi, Ian Wallace, Marco Venzelar, and Barry Weston. We'd also like to thank our sponsors today, Sogeti, who are a long-standing supporter of Unicom's events. To give you a little bit of background, Unicom's been established for 36 years now, since 1984. We're independent, we disseminate and share knowledge through our conferences and events. And we also teach skills through our training programs. Unicom held its first testing event right back in 1989 and has been organising Agile events for more than a decade now. In fact, since really the mid-90s, before the term Agile was widely used. We've also been holding DevOps events. Our first DevOps conference was right back in 2012, so 8 years ago now. And what I'm really excited about today is that this particular session brings together those three topics. Our events take place globally through Europe, Asia Pac, US and South Africa, and of course, more recently and increasingly virtually. So to give a little bit more information, today's session is going to be in three parts. We begin with a presentation by Ian Wallace and Folu Komalafi, followed by following Ian and Folu's presentation is a panel discussion where we invite Marco and Barry to join, and then after that we'll be having a interactive session with you, the audience. So please send through your questions. Bring up the points you'd like to see addressed. This is designed to be really interactive today. We're using the platform called Slido. If you go to the website slido.com and just type in the event code, which is hashtag P306. So that's slido.com, SLIDO.com, and it's hashtag P for Papa 306. You don't need to log in or anything like that or create an account. You can just go straight into the site and start typing in your questions. You'll also be able to upvote questions that you see appear on screen. So if there's a question somebody else has asked and you think that's a really good point, I'd like to hear that discussed, please click the little thumbnail on the right hand side and you can upvote the question. So I hope you enjoy today. As I say, it is going to be really interactive. We're planning on a running time of about 60 minutes. So please sit back and enjoy and do interact. Thank you very much. I will now hand over to Ian and Folu.
So thank you for the introduction, Alec. Thank you for joining this webinar. It's a real honour to be presenting to this group of fellow professionals on this platform. So I'm Ian Wallace and I'm a Solutions Director at Sogeti, and I'm supported by the brilliant Folu Komalafi, who is one of our management consultants. Today we're providing you with some insights and trends that we've pulled from the lead and test reports, and I'll cover what those are shortly. We hope this webinar will either give you a different perspective to consider to the one that you already have, or provide you with some acknowledgement that the views and approaches are aligned with your fellow test professionals. So why are we asking this question advertised? To put it simply, we hear this coming a lot from our clients and in various ways, and the solution is something that I'm personally a big supporter of. The session today will anchor around Folu and I providing you some insights into market data while offering you some of our own thoughts and experiences. We will then close out with our conclusions. As I mentioned, I want to start by drawing your attention to the source of the data and the insights that have helped us validate our conclusion today. You'll see that the World Quality Report and continuous testing reports feature heavily, as you'd expect. So the World Quality Report was released last October with its 11th edition. We are all very proud of what the report tells us and how it influences the IT industry and those that focus on QA and testing. I hope that most of you have had a chance to either listen or to view some of the content being discussed later in the various webinars or online content over the last year. The 12th edition of the report will be coming out soon, and we like to ask you just to keep a lookout for those communications and respective websites for that report to come out. The continuous testing report was released earlier this year, and the results were centered around 5 key themes. So, for example, shift right, shift left, and test organization. 500 interviews were carried out across 8 countries and 10 sectors, providing us with a really robust set of opinions and outcomes. We interviewed senior decision makers in the IT management functions for companies with more than 500 employees, just to really give us that relevant data for us to draw our conclusions. So let's get into some of the data, and follow, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian, for that. And thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar. It's really an honor for me to be presenting with my colleagues today. So I'm going to start on how much is being spent, how much of IT budget is being spent on testing and QA. From what quality reports we see the survey, we still the metrics. There's been a decline in overall IT spending. For example, in 2013, 23% of the IT budget was spent on testing. In 2015, 35%, and now it's down to 23% in 2019. In our view, what's the decline for this? We can ask this question: is decline in QA budget year-on-year cause for alarm? In our view, and according to this report, the answer is no. And it's actually not a lowered perceived importance for testing. Our view for this decline is as follows. Now we know testing is becoming part of mainstream and integral part of development, with developers taking on roles of testing. This is making it very difficult to truly track the real cost of testing. Also, we know the shift left approach to testing is making it easier for companies to push out products as early as possible and to detect defects. This also is actually lowering the cost of testing. So it's effective and is lowering the cost of testing. Now we have current trends of the emerging technology and methodology: Agile, DevOps, virtualization of test environments, and cloud technology. In cloud technology, you can provision an environment as at when you need it, and you pay as you go. They're all streamlining testing budget and QA processes. There's also the use of open source tools. We know in most of my recent projects, we've used open source tools, so we don't have to pay for commercial tools. This is also lowering the cost of QA and testing. So I'll move over to the next slide, which is actually what the C-level focus for QA. According to this survey, most of the respondents believe that QA should contribute to business growth and business outcomes. You detect software defects before go live, and then it contributes to end user satisfaction. For example, ease of use, performance, accessibility, end user experience. I'm sure you know how many times you've tried to use any app and it's not responding. You just go for another one. So it's actually profit growth as well. So we know that all this quality and works highly secured products will protect the corporate brand and image, because you will be delivering high quality services and products and not putting any the security as well, thinking about the security as well as you go along. This shows that testing is actually very, very important to the business, and is not just solely about finding bugs. It's actually a very fundamental importance in business outcomes and growing your business. So I'll move over to slide 5, which we talk about automation. Automation is the emerging trend in QA and testing these days. Is actually seen as a silver bullet. So why is it failing to deliver its full potential? According to, let's look at this quality report. According to the metrics, we know that 65% have said that they have difficulty to automate because of changes in application. Difficulty because application and releases are very rapid. Sometimes releases go on for maybe every hour. In my recent projects, the releases are on almost every two days. It's very, very difficult for automated tools to keep up with this. Not because they're efficient, it's because initially automated tools are made to record manual steps. They're not intelligent enough to detect frequent changes in UI. So this, I think, this in automation, any automation will be regarded that centralization is more effective. Centralization function, we address all these problems, because in that case, you can have automation factory, centralized automation factory, where we try and do proof of concept on emerging open tools, and then you maintain data, maintain the test environment, maintain the, make sure you're on top of test environment availability. So this is actually a very good candidate for centralized functions. So I think I've covered most of the slides now, and I will hand you over to Ian. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Follow. So now we're moving on to some data to do with the continuous testing report and what that is providing us. So we can see that Agile, DevOps continue to feature as you'd expect, but interestingly, the responses suggest that some are still developing their own models and principles. I've personally translated this to be the hybrid model that we can all recognize, I'm sure. These are the ones where organizations are seeking to take the collaborative behaviors, speed and flexibility of the Agile delivery, whilst retaining the structure, control and transparency of those sequential phases and bigger releases. As a result, we can then also conclude that the requirement for those multi-skilled teams and embedding QA and testing within Agile project teams isn't going away. So then we have to ask ourselves, what risk does this pose to the overall control of organizations from a QA point of view? So now we know what the models organizations are adopting. What does this do for the organization of testing? What is reassuring here for me personally is that organizations still have a requirement or bias, shall we say, towards having specialized or central teams. So in turn, acknowledging that testing is just one part of the overall QA process. That comes out in the data here in the top 3 responses we can see. The challenge is then enabling those organizations to let go of the right things to achieve pace and flexibility they desire, whilst retaining the ownership of activities that will promote the control and predictability. Finding that balance is going to be essential if organizations are going to fully support the Agile DevOps transition. So here is our conclusion. Should organizations have a centralized function? Our answer is yes, and partially. A hybrid model is our recommendation that enables the organizations to keep up the latest technology and approaches, whilst ensuring that organizations have the overarching consistent focus on quality for the business. So as Follow was hinting earlier, we need to minimize that gap between Agile and DevOps teams to the wider business and really engage in their objectives around growth and end user satisfaction. The hybrid or partial centralized model will allow the decentralized teams to continue to operate with that flexibility and flair that they desire, while providing the framework and the accelerators to align with the longer term strategies for QA within their organization and the business as a whole. The slide you're looking at here suggests that these are the areas where the centralized team should be focusing on to support that Agile and DevOps teams. I picked out a few that I'd like to talk to you about now. So tools and partner management and vendor management. So retaining these centrally will allow many organizations to engage with vendors from a stronger position. For example, if we can see demand for tooling across the organization, the vendors will see greater sales opportunities and in return negotiate better rates with us, with the pipeline being more predictable. And we really need to avoid, and we could avoid, the reinvention of the wheel of each project going out to those vendors and suppliers for the same requirement from different angles. Partner management is a particularly interesting one for me in recent engagements with clients. We've seen contracts with suppliers of software not being held to or not containing any accountability for quality measures or expectations of testing transparency deliverables. So how can we truly shift left if we aren't working with the vendors to get that visibility? I've had a recent example whereby introducing some defect transparency, working with a supplier's test phase, we were able to see the problem wasn't actually with their code, it was with the client's requirements. This changed relationship and willingness to share this information immediately, coming at it from a strategic, more central view rather than project by project. The trust with the vendor was established. They realized the transparency was there for much as their benefit as it was ours. QA hit squads. I love this one personally because I can imagine the Avengers assembling with Nick Fury at the helm, ready for action. But in reality, this isn't about superheroes in capes, but more about providing organizations with protection and risk mitigation. The QA hit squads would be deployed to support troubled or high-risk programs or projects, ideally proactively, of course, but in the worst case, reactively. This refers back to the point Follow was making earlier around the importance of what is important, to the C-levels at organizations. Work in the central team, organizations will identify those programs up front and start to de-risk them in the planning stage. For example, they might have a particular program that will be more aligned to business growth, their business growth agenda, more than others. And will need just that little bit more governance to maximize those chances of predictable delivery. Dashboards and innovation. So the key to increasing quality and efficiency is transparency of data to identify process improvements and what is working well. So I'm a big fan, I'm sure as everyone is identifying gaps and continuous improvement. What about recognizing what's going really well? You find you lose the trust if you don't pick up those things. So holding that data centrally and using that to work with other projects, you start to build that trust and start to recognize what's working well in one team, and you can pass that over to another. This is my experience in particular relevant with a decentralized team, where the daily control over plans are left to the projects themselves. Non-functional testing shared services. So this is really relevant if we bear in mind the focus on security and performance that we've seen recently and what Follow was referring to earlier. So how many times have we seen expensive technical non-functional testers procured by project teams for weeks and weeks, sometimes months, to finally get access to the stable code set without much time to do anything with it? A lot of money spent without much value. So delivering this requirement from a central function would minimize that wasted spend by keeping a lean central pool of resources and smoothing that demand, reacting to those project demands. Communities and events. So for me personally, the importance of our respective professional communities and the softer side of what we do is more important than ever. For example, these webinars and joining professional communities together. We've been so reliant on collaboration platforms and new ways of communicating. So the risk of disengagement here is very much here to stay while we're working in the way we are. And it's really important that the centralized team will look to mitigate that by working with the projects. So retaining the central focus of bringing communities together, sharing ideas and experiences, we'll see the right focus and attention placed on this key component, because we all know that the project teams will always have a bias toward delivery. So it's really important that someone independent will help those teams realize what they need to do. So that concludes the presentation part of this webinar today. I really hope you could relate to some of the content and you enjoyed listening. Both Follow and I are really keen to develop our professional networks, so we'd really like to encourage you to reach out to us directly to discuss these topics more and any of the content that you've seen today. Now, if I can hand back over to Alec, who will now be facilitating the Q&A panel session.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian and Follow. A great presentation. We have I have a couple of questions I noted down during the presentation to ask you. The first one is, Follow mentioned problems with automation. Can we explore that more about how centralized function would mitigate the problems we're seeing? Also, we saw Automation Factory featured in centralized function in one of the slides. So can we explore that a little bit now as well? And also at this point, I'd like to invite Barry and Marco to contribute as well.
Thanks, Alec. Marco, do you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, interesting. The kind of Automation Factory kind of sounds back from the kind of big factory with producing kind of output for automation, but it's more, I think it's the role of a kind of a centralized QA function where automation fits in there, where it can supply kind of standards for projects to use, encourage cross-project cooperation, because too often you get projects that's kind of do the little bits and the little islands and kind of their own little attempts, and then a centralized kind of automation kind of factory that could actually help with that and take that kind of burden away. and especially when you're talking about Agile and DevOps, having projects having to kind of shift left and right and on their own accords, kind of a central function, I see that a lot better working and kind of supporting the projects. And I think that helps projects kind of focus on what they have coming through the pipeline, protects the kind of the cadence of the project, and it still remains. I mean, just one important thing to know is it still is the project's responsibility to kind of build those automation assets. It's not the factory will do that for them. Of course, if a factory might be able to set up so that they can provide some influx of resourcing if needed, emergency fixes or all that kind of stuff. But we're not talking about a factory of 20 test resources waiting there to kind of hit the ground running of something that needed. Ultimately, there's no kind of central recipe of saying, right, this is what it looks like. It very much depends on what it looks like on the organization, how kind of what kind of setup it is, and on its projects.
Yeah, I agree, Marco, definitely.
So
I think it's also important that with the centralized function, you effectively de-silo some of the project work, because most of the stuff that we're delivering these days is about collaborating systems and collaborating components. It gives an opportunity for a cross-work stream view to be gained as well, and to make sure that you've got consistency and quality, and you're not repeating work.
Yeah. Okay.
It's consistency is the key. I think you can waste. I think I referred to it in the presentation. It's the reinvention of the wheel you want to avoid constantly. Projects constantly reinventing their own wheel, when the central team can, yeah, as Marco was saying, come up with the frameworks and almost
especially
the buffers to make sure they're going in the right direction. Yeah.
Exactly.
And they can maintain the framework.
Yeah, frameworks, tools. I mean, you hear about proof of concepts and different projects kind of, oh yeah, we've seen this tool and we're going to use it. It's great that we need to have that, but if then another project do the same thing again, that's kind of missing the point then. So that's where the kind of central role of directing traffic and directing information, it's a repository of knowledge.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got another question to put to the panel. I've noted down. In the final conclusion, Ian identified a number of areas that a centralized function will focus on, but which one would the panel look to implement first, and why?
That's a good one. Yeah, Barry, do you want to go with that one, Barry? Start us off.
You can't do anything in isolation, because they all complete the overall picture of good, robust delivery. But to kick it off and to give a framework around which you're going to build your whole testing community, your whole testing capability, I think it's QA strategy, QA policy that needs to come first, so that it sets the scenes, sets expectations, allows you to socialize across project teams, across delivery units, to ensure that the solutions that are going to be implemented are a size that fits all, rather than just fit one particular project. It's difficult to get the balance between centralized policy and strategy and freedom to deliver, but it's actually essential if you want to deliver good quality solutions to your customers. To, as Folu said right in the middle of her presentation, to enable business growth and to get customer satisfaction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, Barry. I think it's making sure that we don't just go for the industry standard stuff. Sometimes that might not be fit for purpose. It's making sure that everything aligns back to those business growth and the objectives. If some organisations, as we've seen, are more risk averse than others, so therefore you don't want to have a heavyweight QA process necessarily to block them from doing that.
No, it's got to be right-sized, and generic process rarely fits any organisation, because I don't think a generic organisation exists. Everyone has specific needs that they need from their solutions, and it's essential that as QA professionals we listen to what the business wants and ensure that the policy and strategy for QA actually supports the business need, rather than just delivers technically brilliant solutions that may totally miss the mark.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I think at this point we are now going to open up for Q&A, and I can already see on the Slido app there's some great questions coming in. I'll put my glasses back on and read the questions as they appear. And just a reminder for everybody, the platform is slido.com, and it's hashtag P for Papa 306. That's the event code. So just go to slido.com, use the event code hashtag P306, and type in your questions. And I'll start off. I'll be democratic and read the questions that are getting the most upvotes at the moment. So the first one I can see is: developers increasingly lean towards hardcore DevOps and are skeptical and resistant to the idea of centralized QA. How do we convince them of benefits?
I'll take that one. I'll take that one, Alec, and guys on the panel, if you want to chip in when you need it. I think the idea isn't of a skeptical developer isn't a new one, for sure, particularly around testing. So yeah, in my experience, it's all to do with the information and the data you're using to convince them, and the transparency. So if we're convincing them that we can make their job easier within that DevOps world by having that level of assurance around it, making things easier next time, you just have to have the examples there to convince them of that, for sure, of the benefits. They're going to be wanting to be working on the next more exciting feature. So the quicker you can get away from what they're doing and let them free on that new feature, I think they'll be pleased. So just finding out what's the benefit for them.
Yeah,
guys, I'm thinking. You guys want to add on that?
Yeah, I think it's back to that for the saying that the what there's a number of things as happening within DevOps that are within a project that are done constantly, and it's that kind of distracting stuff that needs to kind of give that more away to a centralized function. But also things you in a project you found a best way of doing something, and that could be in anything. And then being able to kind of centrally store that, or if there's even somebody sitting there for that, then kind of disseminate it to the projects. That will bring benefit to the organization. Okay? I mean, it's great for people in their own little kind of developers and the little projects and the little tribes, whatever they are, to saying, right, we've made these solutions, but in the long run, it's not just a project that can benefit from it. It needs to be the whole organization. So that's often, I mean, there are some mechanisms around there that's cross projects can do that, and if you have those, great. But we see too often that it's still all little islands that we're working on, and a centralized QA, and we're not talking about this massive organization. It's a small kind of nimble kind of department or kind of group of people, or a group of on the websites on the internet, to kind of share that stuff. I think that's where you provide the benefits.
Can I offer a build on that, Ian, if I may?
Please do, yeah, please do, yeah.
So, I mean, DevOps and solution delivery isn't just about getting the solution to market. It needs to be maintained for months, years, that it's in live use. If you don't have some sort of centralized function factory, as we were talking about earlier, the risk is that you have less maintainable solutions, because you're going to end up with 1,001 different tools created within the different DevOps groups, which means that it makes it very difficult for anyone to maintain them in 5, 10 years time, when those particular skills might not be there. Centralizing it means that you have a more manageable tool set that you need to be able to support in the longer term.
Another thing I want to add to that is most of the DevOps process, you have quality gateway at every phase. And if you have centralized functions, you can have template to use for that, thereby freeing the developers of being the quality gateway every time at stand-up meetings. So I think it's very effective for DevOps functions. So centralized functions is very good for that.
Thanks, Follow.
Okay, thanks. Next question is a very popular question with lots of votes. What's the best practice for the NFT engagement model?
I'll start with this one again, guys, and then everyone, so you can jump in as needed. So I think, as I was saying earlier, that I don't necessarily believe in the best practice. It's definitely the right practice for whatever engagement that we're on, whatever company we're on. So it would be definitely fit for purpose. You could have a particular organisation that has risks around security of data and performance, more important than others. So in that sense, it's all about engaging with the business analysts and the requirements, and making sure you're building in that performance and non-functional requirements early in the process, more than finding out just through testing. There's so many things we could do in educating and influencing those requirements and design, and make sure that that's there. So the central function would be, as I said in my presentation, a lean team that would be parachuted into different projects at different stages to try and influence and make it more predictable from that side of things, and leaning a lot on, as I said, the requirements that are coming out from the business and what's important to them.
Yeah, and I think
anybody else?
Yeah, I think I'll add to that. I mean, the easiest one of kind of best engagement model, one of the best practices is basically get involved early. So, and that's responsibility of all within the DevOps team, is not to kind of saying, well, that's something we leave to the end of the project. Our little piece of code that we're developing now is not good. It's not big enough to do performance testing. Do it early on, monitor it in the beginning, and then once you got enough to run a full-blown test on it, start running tests early. It's not an end of the game exercise. So
I think as well as you may not remember everyone on the call from my slide, but they all very much hinge on each other. So just talking about what Marco was talking about there in terms of running that performance testing, that centralized team would be talking to the environments team, talking to the data teams, making sure that the automation scripts are learning from the performance scripts, perhaps, or the other way around, and really making sure that it's all working together. So very much not in silos. We don't want those centralized teams to be working in silos. It's very much all working in tandem for the greater good, I think.
And sometimes the centralized team can help with proof of concept for most of these projects, so you don't waste too much time on selecting tools. And then API tested, centralized team, they will have all the knowledge and the skills for that, and to be able to come up with the required API testing before going live, before going to production, where you have to do pre-prod, where you have to do the real big bang performance testing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another really popular question that's coming. It's a good one, actually. Do you advocate embedding someone from a central function into delivery teams, or keeping them separate to maintain independence?
What do you reckon, Barry?
I don't think independence depends on location. It depends on reporting lines. So I'm absolutely an advocate that your independent QA function is fully embedded within delivery teams, so that what needs to be done is done within the teams rather than to them, and that way you're going to get better uptake. You're going to get less resistance to the standardization of approaches, because you've got the teams fully built into what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And then if it's agile methodology you're using, you have to have somebody from the centralized team there in the Scrum meetings to report in. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marco, anything on that, Marco?
No, I think that's, I mean, I think we are talking about kind of making sure that the central function is supporting projects. But as Barry says, there needs to be functional kind of tasks from centralized team to be done within any project. If that's taken up by somebody separately from a central team or somebody from within the team, that doesn't matter. As long as it's being looked at and keep track of, and that's, I mean, that's where you go for it. And it does depend on your organization.
Okay, so next question for the panel is, Aslide questioned why automation is failing to deliver its potential. Is there still a misunderstanding on what projects should be expecting from automation?
So I have a view, but Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, over all the years, yeah, it's been a long time. Everybody still seems to be promising everything around automation, but that's the problem. It's making promises before you have all the information available, and it could be on organization, could be on technology. It needs to make sense, and DevOps revolves around a lot more automation. I mean, to be honest, you go, it probably is as far as saying, without automation, there is no DevOps. And you will have to do small, kind of in small, easily digestible chunks, and don't promise the world. Yeah, it still happens, and that could be from previous experiences, or the fact that saying, well, I know best, and I'll just get on with it. I like it, but it still needs to be done in small pieces of work and sensibly. If you've got the right technology, you can do a lot of automation, but 100% automation still doesn't exist to a certain extent, basically, at least that one.
I think the expectations of automation are absolutely spot on, and I don't think we really fail to meet the expectations. I think the answer probably lies in the first point that you made, Ian, when you were talking about why it's failing to deliver full potential, and that's because applications change too rapidly with every release, so there's not the opportunity. So you have to take the step back and consider whether it's the requirement statement of need, other upstream activities that you need to address through shift left are the cause of the automation not being able to do its thing.
Yeah, and if I can just offer there as well, I think sometimes project teams get a little bit, I guess, rigid in their thinking about what automation could do. They just talk about education, execution of tests, but I think we would be, recommend that you look at everything around automation. Could it help with test data generation? Could it help with, obviously the regression packs, but script creation, and then we start to then get into the world of AI and everything, and really taking out some of that labor from the process. I say it definitely is misunderstanding, I think.
You're on mute.
Thanks.
You're on mute,
point,
Alex.
and that's another question coming. Sorry, Marco. Can you,
you were
can
on
you hear
mute.
me now?
You were talking, but you were on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Not sure what happened there, technical glitch. Another question, actually, also on automation, and it seems that automation isn't failing to deliver, rather it's failing to be implemented regarding a lack of skilled resources. So in your opinion, can manual testers be upskilled?
Marco, are you okay taking us again? It's on the automation thread. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody can do automation. Again, nowadays there is a lot of different ways of actually getting automation working. or people skilled in automation. That's could be with codeless, it could be with Cucumber, all kind of stuff. So there is a lot more. There is still a technical element sometimes. I mean, yes, I know there is something about codeless automation, but there is something in behind it. But you only earlier part of the first part of your question is, it's if you don't implement it right, then you're destined to fail. Or worse comes to worse, you don't get your return on this. So you spend a lot of time keeping up with keeping things in the right shape and up to date, and that's not always the way to do that. So from day one, if you implement it right, and that's where a centralized function can support it, saying, look, this is done in other places like this, or this is kind of, we had the conversation with somewhere else, and they can support you, and yeah, I mean, eventually that way you get a proper implementation and you get the best process in place to actually bring the benefits of automation in there.
Another thing, most projects are very time boxed. So if you, within that time, it could be very difficult to really train manual testers. So if you have a release coming up and you have only 2 weeks and you don't have the skilled resource, it's very difficult to train manual testers to come up with, because sometimes you need to learn how to code for you to be able to use these tools, as Marco said. So this is why sometimes it's very important to have a centralized team. So you can take skills from there as that's when you need it. So if you decide that you're going to implement automation, so you need to think about the time frame, you need to think about the skills. And so if you think training manual testers within the short period of time, it may be very difficult to maintain those scripts or to record those scripts. So that's another thing I think we need to think about.
And I think going back to my the final slide as well, I think I just said it in the previous question, it's about bringing them all together. So if projects are failing to implement automation because of a skills gap, then bring that to the central function. The central function can support the training needs analysis. They can look at what what the skills and capabilities are across the patch, and potentially make recommendations to move some resources around. The automation factory would be there as well to, are we actually using the right tool for the automation? Are we using more of a more technical API-led automation when something, an object or UI-based automation script might be better and more straightforward for a manual tester to pick up. So yeah, definitely the centralized functions could support that as well.
Okay, thank you. So next question from Tony. It's a good one. How do you stop a centralized QA function becoming a glorified PMO that reports progress instead of improving the ways of working, making improvements?
Really good point, Tony. Yes, there is a risk, of course, but we didn't pick on it too much. I referred to a little bit around the process improvements, but it will be around the dashboards and innovations to increasing the value of QA within the whole process. Being able to demonstrate that, take those lessons from the projects, stopping them from making the same mistakes over and over again, and providing that thought leadership to those projects. And it's about then advertising and taking the projects along each time to make sure, as you say, they're not just reporting test progress. Also look at the metrics you're actually providing. It can't just be test progress. Leave that to the projects.
I think it also comes down to why you've set up the centralized function, and it's all around governance. And although dashboards and innovation is one of the things that's centralized, the population of them, of the dashboards, is done by the project teams. And if we're moving towards continuous testing, automate everything, then those dashboards should be automated and not require an awful lot of human intervention to get from source data to reports that go out to others. That then frees up the central function to be devolved into the delivery teams to support delivery through automation and all the other activities that need to be done.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, this question also has got a lot of upvotes. What is the role you see for a test manager in projects implementing agile methodologies?
Good question. I think everyone's probably got a different view on this one. I'll just go. Barry, do you want to go first, and then we'll work around?
Not really, no, for this one. Because I think it's a really interesting but very difficult question to answer.
I mean, it could be cat amongst the pigeons saying you don't need a test manager in an agile one. I mean, it's one extreme, but again, not unfeasible. It doesn't mean that the test activities don't happen. It's just there is no kind of central manager on it. So in the projects, if you fully shift left and then maybe also shift right, there is a lot you can do in that. It just depends on how, and as Barry earlier said, if you have the automation in place with the dashboards and it feeds in all the information, if you have the right information to make those the call around what the quality of the product is at any given time, there might be need a question of do you still need a manager? But I'll leave that open for everybody else to.
Most of the projects nowadays, if you look at test management nowadays, most of test managers, they're highly skilled, hands-on. So I wrote an article some time ago about the role of a test manager. As a test manager, you need to be hands-on to be really, really useful in agile environment. I worked as a test manager in several agile teams, and I was the QA gateway, running the automation as well at every sprint release, reporting, producing the template, feeding the Scrum team, all the progress. So in these days and age, test management is not just about reporting anymore. Most of my colleagues at Sogeti, we are multi-skilled. So if you put a test manager on an agile project, you're expecting that test manager will be able to do all the QA work, including the automation work, including reporting at every sprint and collecting user stories, make sure the acceptance criteria are thoroughly looked at before you deploy any application into production. So it's really, the test management role now is evolving. And if you're not multi-skilled, like I said, it may be very difficult for you to have a place in Agile.
And I think as a build on what Follow and Marco have said, I think the role of the test manager, perhaps testing overall, is changing. And rather than being the police force of correctness, they should be seen as enablers of delivery. So getting involved early to ensure that all those measures and metrics that Follow was talking about have been satisfied before you get to the end of sprint, the end of delivery cycle, and then come back and say, yeah, you haven't met it. It should be their responsibility to help the teams work towards achieving success at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Simon. What are the biggest challenges you are seeing with clients in implementing a hybrid model rather than the ones that they're used to seeing, like, for example, Waterfall or Agile?
I think the challenges are the high. I think from my personal experiences, what you start to see is organisations saying that they are agile, and controversially, they're just using that as an excuse not to do some of the more structured things they should be doing. They're set up to be waterfall, but they're actually just saying they're agile when they're really not. So I think a lot of the education is there, and I think explaining to people that it's okay to be hybrid. It's okay to take some of the good things from Agile and the good things from Waterfall, but at least just make sure you're educating them on that they know that's what they're doing. Take the flexibility, take the collaborative working and the behaviors and flexibility of Agile into a Waterfall team. Absolutely no problem with that. But people seem to blur the lines between we're Agile when they're really not, and they're it leads to difficulties later on, because finding defects, requirements aren't documented properly in a waterfall way. It leads to confusion and lost time later on in the process, as we know. Anybody else on the panel got to say?
Yeah,
to that?
I think also to do is kind of having a good understanding of who does what. I mean, with Waterfalor and Agile, they are very kind of clear saying what is your role as an Agile tester and all that kind of stuff. But if you have a hybrid model, again, it's nothing wrong with a hybrid model, but it needs to be clear of how do you approach things. Do you do development in full Agile and then go into kind of more kind of waterfall after that? Not a problem, but make sure that it's clear who's doing what, and put enough kind of the dashboards again. I mean, it's as long as you know what people are doing, what the quality of product is, and of the projects, then you're halfway through that.
Thanks, Marco.
Okay.
Sometimes I was going to say, most projects, if they don't have a clear methodology at the start, so most people are used to waterfall. So introducing Agile, you may have to really mix the two, and then it eventually lead to change to Agile later. So hybrid, sometimes most projects you need to use the hybrid model where you use the Agile and a bit of waterfall. Once you, especially in green projects where people are not really used to Agile, because to implement Agile in full-blown Agile is very difficult for sometimes in organization, and they don't, I mean, you need to teach them about change. So sometimes it's best to come up with an hybrid model in that instance. I've used hybrid model in most of the projects because they're greenfield and it's difficult to implement Agile because Agile is very strict. And sometimes you need to really have the roles to Scrum Master and everyone involved, which can be difficult at the start of a project. So sometimes hybrid will be useful.
Thank you. So brings us to the next question, slightly different question. What would be an ideal template of quality metrics implemented by a centralized function?
I'll take this again just to start with. So this is something actually close to my heart because I've literally just done it with one of our big clients. So in terms of the template, I'm presuming that means, you know, what type of quality metrics might we include. So what we found was, you know, milestones missed or milestones hit was a good metric. Defect leakage, as I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, and also that, you know, test progress in terms of test productivity, test efficiency, the code coverage, requirements coverage being key as well. So a lot of those metrics would be something that we would look to implement for then that centralized function, but also just the how successful and the cost of projects. You know, is the cost of projects going up or down in terms of comparison? Just bringing it back to the presentation as well, I think the automation percentage was a really good one as well, to say how mature are we on the automation pack, so how much of your projects are automating. So that then gave us the data to then be able to go back to those projects and say, well, why are you not doing more? Why are you not automating more? What's stopping you? Is it skill, like the previous question we've had earlier? Is it the skilled resources, or is it an understanding of automation? So in terms of those quality metrics, those would give us really good view from that centralized function.
I'd offer a slightly different view here. So if the purpose of QA testing delivery is to support the business, then your ideal set of metrics should in some way reflect the needs of the business. So if they're extremely risk averse, then your metric should be giving a continual view of risk of going live, so you know how close you are to going live. If it's about usability, if it's about getting stuff to market quickly, then you need to make sure that your metrics satisfy the needs of the business. All the technical metrics you spoke about are essential for measuring the quality of the processes that you're using. But you also need to consider the real quality of the delivery that's going to market, and quite a few of those that we typically look at give very little meaningful insight into what's the customer going to really think about it when it hits their computer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the particular client I was referring to, yeah, definitely, that their problem statement was finding defects way too late, too many in production, and the cost of testing was too high. So those were the problem statements we had to try and address and track. So yeah, take your point, Barry, completely. Okay, anybody else? We'll move on to the next one.
Oh, cool. Okay, so as we go on to the next question, do we have a view on how continuous integration and service virtualization help in the DevOps arena?
I think it's speed, isn't it? I think, but anybody else on the panel?
Yeah, I mean, I think just depend on what you're working on. I mean, if it's a standalone delivery, then maybe not. But if you have the requirement of actually having your application to be integrated with other things, then you need to build that area. And having that early development working with serverless virtualization, it's very beneficial, because it will help you get an understanding of how your code is integrating without having to worry about all the other systems being there ready for you to be at the same stage. So yeah, I mean, it's, again, this comes back to the whole DevOps area being automation driven. You need to have those tools around you if there's a need for it. I mean, there's no fixed recipe. So DevOps is everything. No, it's what is your organization and what is your project.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. I'm just aware that we're coming up to the 60 minutes. Are you, panelists, are you okay to continue for a few more minutes? Because it certainly seems there's a lot of questions coming in. And
yeah,
I think as many as possible. Okay, fantastic. So we'll go for a little bit longer. So the next question. By doing proper QA, we will be preventing defects rather than finding them. How do we prove this increased efficiency?
So I think I referred to a little bit of this before in terms of the technical metrics. I think so. Defect leakage would be a good one. And I think if you're finding less defects later on in the cycles, obviously your test productivity and test execution rate is going to be better as well. So I think I would stick to those initially, just based on that question. Anybody on the panel got a different view on that?
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's that measuring. Just make sure you got your measurements in the right place, and providing that analysis. So if you just saying there's a defect, that's probably not going to be good enough to help you that. If you got all the information around it, saying where was it, what was functionality, and all that kind of stuff, it will help you provide that analysis to look at kind of, well, where did it start? Where did these issues lie back? And even when they're fixed, how they got fixed. So it's not just saying, well, fixed, out of the door, gone, forgot about it. If you have then 15 new defects that are all resolving the same thing, you need to have you should have investigated it earlier.
You also need to measure carefully. So you need to measure, the current state before you make any change and do what is termed as proper QA, and then make the changes that you want to make, give them time to bed in so that they become part of business as usual, then remeasure and then demonstrate the changes that have been made. You hope it's made an improvement. You can't guarantee that.
Okay, Alec, back to you, I think.
Okay, thank you. So within Agile teams with testers and developers, is it advisable to have automation within the team? So I'm just trying to really quick, within the team and have separate automation, and why?
I think I'll go to Marco first, but I think Follow, you've probably got a view on the Agile side. So Marco.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting one. To be honest, I mean, automation is I mean, it should not be separate. In Agile teams, everybody is, as Follow earlier said, everybody is kind of technical capable, or at least able to do different roles, and so automation should be baked in, and it's just a part of the project, and that could be a developer, could be a tester. I mean, again, it does depend on how you approach this. So if you're doing test-driven developments, then you build your automation first, and then kind of see how it fails and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's very much part of it. Of course, if you then talk about other automation further down the line, it might be slightly different. So automation around integrated testing, integrated automation, or even things like maybe even kind of towards BAU when you talk about more scenario-based testing. Yeah, it might be more like that. But again, from within a DevOps team, within an Agile team, I think it's very much part of the package for each person.
And Follow, from your experience in the Agile teams, have you seen automation embedded or separate?
Yes, we normally have within every team, Agile team, you have automation, you have automated tester, so you need to have automation in that team, because in the initial, like Marco said, for TDD you need to have scripts, and then even for every release, in the pipeline you need to run scripts. If it's deployed to prod, if it's deployed to dev, you need to run your scripts. So we always have automation in every team. So for example, at the end of every sprint, you need to run your automation script. So you need automation. QA that is very skilled in automation is needed within Agile team at all times. I mean, according to most of the places I've worked anyway, if you're implementing automation, yes, you will need an automation tester within that team.
Yeah, embedded, yeah.
I think it's all about remembering the function of testing, QA, whatever you want to call it, is about enabling within DevOps. So having them within the teams, having them working collaboratively with the developers who are creating the code has to be essential. You really don't want finished work inspection and go back 2 weeks later and say you've got it wrong. You want to work with them to enable them to get the right answer as you're going along, and even now with probably almost everyone working remotely using collaboration tools, you can still get the collaborative working between the different team members and have your QA fully embedded within those delivery teams.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, question from Callum, it goes back to automation again. Good point. Is there a battle between spending time developing automation tools and actually delivering the required automation scripts for a project?
Guess where this one's coming, Marco?
You develop tools, you develop scripts.
Go for it, Marco.
No, but I think yeah, it is that that there is this potential for spending. I mean, automation got people they're kind of keen, kind of building their little tools and everything else. But that's also part of the kind of central kind of automation factory that could potentially do that. But do we have to build new tools every time? Is there are such legion of tools? Do we just select the right one? Do we? It's a balance, because do we then say, right, I like this tool, but it doesn't do this, so I'll develop it. You then spend a week doing that. Do you get a benefit out of it? It still comes back down to that, and the projects should be focused on delivering speeds within a team, within the cadence. So it's important to make sure to make that kind of weigh that up. What is it? I mean, if you, and the other thing also is people say, right, we have a tool, it doesn't really work, we need to kind of build something else. Well, change the tool. There's nothing wrong with changing a tool. Yes, it is an upheaval involved in it, but again, it's the balance. If it's better to kind of just bin the tool and use something else, if your scripts are generic enough to do that, then why not?
Is he asking whether you develop automation tools? Most projects, you don't develop automation tools. You do proof of concept for the scripts there, for the tool that you want to use for your project, and you develop your script based on that. So this question is saying delivering the required
I think it does depend on what you mean by tools. So, I mean, somebody builds a little function and I call it a tool. So I see where it comes from. But yeah, same thing. Indeed, just prove it. Prove it initially.
Yeah.
I think to answer the question, yes, it is a battle, definitely. But yeah, as Marco was describing, it's finding what actually the objectives are and then reacting from there.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm conscious of a little bit over time, but we've got just a few questions still coming in. Next one from Jordan. Why do you see the automation factory being centralized? Don't you lose close proximity to the project teams, focus on delivery and ownership of the project goals?
I think we've answered this one already, haven't we? Which is that we're going to devolve the delivery into the project teams, but keep the governance and the ownership of the resources and their careers centrally.
Yeah, I think you're right, Barry. I think we covered that a little bit in the panel.
Okay, so I'll come on to the next one just very quickly. Which one of the 10 themes is the most difficult to implement and why?
Oh, good question. I'll offer my view. I found constantly that the test data and environments is constantly quite difficult to implement. I think you've got very diverse requirements usually coming from each project. Environments are going to be either partially on-premise, they're going to be on cloud. You've got different projects at different stages, technology-wise. So trying to bring all of those together centrally at the speed that the projects demand, without the risk is going to become a blocker to progress. And I think people will quickly lose a little bit of faith if we aren't reacting to that quickly. So one of those would be the most difficult, and certainly one to tread carefully on, I think, from a centralized viewpoint. Does any other panel members have a different view or share that view? Or
I think I share that one. It's partially also to do with in a lot of organizations that test data is indeed not just to the responsibility of just the project itself. I mean, we can all kind of make up data, but as soon as you go into a more production-like environment or pre-prod or something like that, then different requirements around it and different people get involved, and it does tend to be difficult to do. And I think if I look at it from my point of view, I think the non-functional testing is sometimes also quite difficult to implement for me, because it all happens. It happens still too late. It's still from, well, I've got too little to do now, so don't worry about it now. We'll talk about it later. And it's convincing people constantly about this, and that's still an uphill struggle. That one.
Yeah. And most companies don't have non-functional requirements as well, so it can be very difficult to benchmark.
Start from the beginning, indeed.
Okay, I'll just read the next one quickly. I'm not sure I'm reading this correctly, but I'll do my best. Different verticals has their own QA function.
Verticals, I think.
Verticals, that's it. Sorry,
verticals, yeah.
Different verticals, or my bad eyesight. Different verticals have their own QA functions. The centralized QA function is only limited to QA assurance of the different QA teams.
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, to be honest. Barry or Marco, do you?
Let me try and unpick this for you, Ian. I think the question is, if you've got different verticals within your organization, is there going to be antagonism between what those QA functions are doing and what you want to impose as a central QA function with overall oversight of the QA approaches. And I think this goes right back to the second question that we addressed in the initial panel discussion, which is policy and strategy is the way to address it, because work with those individual elements in their different verticals to ensure that the support, the governance, the overarching view that the centralized QA team has actually satisfies the needs of all the different parts of the business, and it's difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense now.
Okay. I guess we could perhaps take the next. Sorry, follow. No, I think we've covered that one.
No,
so
I'm just reading the question.
Okay, no problem. So the next question is, you say QA should be partially centralized. What about testing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. The testing. Well, firstly, I'm glad that we separated the two. You know, the QA process and testing. I think that's a good point to start off with. Separating those. So testing, for my view, is definitely resides back in the project teams. That hands-on testing within the project teams has to stay there. As I think we were saying in the presentation, the QA process really does facilitate what those testers are doing, and enabling them and accelerating their processes as best as possible and giving them what they need to be successful. I guess the only touch point might be the non-functional testing side of it, where we would be looking to maybe retain those non-functional testers essentially to drop into different projects at a different time to help the projects avoid having lots of expensive non-functional testers sat there waiting for some stable code to do anything with it. I think that would be the only exception I would make to that. Anybody else on the panel, different view or like to add?
No.
Okay.
Well, same, yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so I think this will be our last question that's coming. It's been there for a little while. What is the best way you see to transform a typical quality assurance organization to quality engineering organization to be able to establish continuous testing?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that question. I wonder what's the trying to breed out there.
Can I try and answer it, Ian, and then see if you agree? So if we're moving from QA to quality engineering, so we're moving from finished work inspection to enabling delivery of solutions. And if you're going to make that change, there's a number of things that you have to get absolutely right if you're going to be successful. First of all, you need to get senior buy-in that what you're going to do is going to be supported by them, because there will be some disruption as you make the change. It's impossible to make change without there being some sort of impact. You also need to work very, very carefully with the delivery teams to ensure that those changes that you're making to make that change support their delivery models, support the continuous testing approach that you want to implement, and pilot before you put it live. You don't want to risk your business by moving to continuous testing if you're not absolutely certain that it's going to work. And communicate far more than you ever thought you needed to communicate about what you're going to do to make those changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the question, there's two words in there that just scream that you need to take this step by step, is transforming an organization. I mean, those two, I mean, that's not easy, and you need to be kind of clear about that and follow step by step.
Yeah. But if the person's that's is it Carwell, I think, who's asked, please reach out to please reach out to me separately as well. I'd love to be able to talk about that a little bit more with you offline as well. We'll connect afterwards.
Right. So I think that brings us to the end. Well, thank you again, everybody, for participating. It's been a fantastic session. It was really encouraging to see just how many people are attending and some fantastic questions coming. So thank you, everybody. And in particular, thank you, Follow, Ian, Barry and Marco for running a great session. Much appreciated. Thank you very much, everybody.
And thank you, Alex, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.